Someone suggested that I do lesser known movies, so here we go. The roommate starts off with this girl named Sarah, and we learn that she's going to college for design. When she gets there, she meets this girl named Tracy who asks her to go to a party at a fraternity house, and Sarah says yes. And this is when Sarah meets the drummer, whose name is Steven. Tracy ends up drinking a little too much at this party, so Steven and Sarah bring her back to the dorms. And this is when Sarah meets her roommate Rebecca, who's an art major. A little while later, we meet this professor of a fashion design class, and Sarah desperately wants to get into his class because apparently he's like a really good professor in the community of fashion design, I guess. That night, Tracy goes to their dorm and asks Sarah and Rebecca if they want to go to a club with her, and Rebecca declines, but Sarah says yes. However, Tracy ditches Sarah at the club. Sarah calls Rebecca, who comes and picks her up, and this is when we see the girls starting to become friends. The next day, Rebecca takes Sarah to an art gallery and shows her this super creepy painting, and she explains to Sarah that it's actually her favorite painting. Little bit worrisome. On their way home, they walk past this tattoo parlor, and Sarah explains to Rebecca that she has this tattoo to honor her deceased sister, Emily. We also see that Sarah has this necklace, and one day Rebecca borrows it, and Sarah ends up getting a little bit annoyed at Rebecca and says, "This is the one thing you can't borrow because it belonged to my sister." A few days later, Sarah's out jogging when she finds this really cute stray cat, and she sneaks the cat into the dorm where the girls decide to keep it and name it Cuddles. Later on, we see Steven come into the coffee shop that Sarah's working at, and he asks her out. However, when Sarah gets home, Rebecca is all dressed up and says, "Hey, I have a surprise. I got us tickets to see Richard Price because he's your favorite artist." So being a good friend, Sarah cancels her plans with Steven to go to the art gallery with Rebecca instead. Sarah gives Rebecca this pair of earrings to wear to the event. However, Rebecca doesn't have her ears pierced, so her solution is to take the earrings and fucking stab them through her own earlobes. The next day, we meet Sarah's friend Irene, who's a pretty accomplished and popular stylist. We also see that Sarah finds Steven and she's like, "Hey, I'm sorry I canceled. Can we go out again?" And he says yes. Later that night, Tracy is in the shower when all the lights go out, and Tracy is attacked by Rebecca, who tells her to stay away from Sarah. But even that isn't enough for Rebecca because she proceeds to straight up rip out Tracy's belly button piercing. A little while later, we see Rebecca obsessively calling Sarah, who doesn't have her phone on her because she's out with Steven. Sarah and Steven get back to the dorms where he kisses her goodnight, and when they turn, Rebecca is standing there and she starts getting super pissed because Sarah didn't call her back and she was really worried. Meanwhile, after the whole shower incident, Tracy has switched dorms. And when Sarah runs into Tracy and says, "Hey, why'd you switch dorms?" Tracy says, "Yeah, I just didn't like the vibe." Rebecca approaches the two girls, which makes Tracy run off. Honestly, I would too, though, if that person attacked me in the shower. A few days later, Sarah and Steven go out on another date, and they end up going back to Steven's to mess around. Now, we learned a little bit earlier that Sarah has this jerk ex-boyfriend named Jason who just keeps calling her and calling her. And while Sarah's out with Steven, Jason calls Sarah, but Sarah had left her phone back at the dorm. And when Jason calls Sarah, Rebecca picks up the phone, pretending to be Sarah. Things get a little steamy over the phone before Rebecca says, "Hey, don't call me again," and she hangs up. A little while later, we see that someone from the student body caught the girls with Cuddles, and the girls aren't supposed to have Cuddles in the dorm. So Sarah goes to Irene and says, "Hey, do you mind looking after our cat?" And Irene's like, "No, I travel way too much. But if you want to keep the cat, you can move in here with me." But when Sarah tells Rebecca that she considered the idea, Rebecca just freaks out. And Sarah's like, "Okay, you know what? I'm sorry. This was just an idea so that we can actually keep Cuddles." A little bit later, when Sarah's out, Rebecca goes to do laundry and she takes Cuddles with her. And this is just super sad because Rebecca proceeds to put poor Cuddles inside one of the dryers and turns it on. Now, a little bit later, we see Rebecca alone in the dorm room, and she proceeds to start hitting herself to leave bruises, as well as cutting herself with a box cutter. This girl is fucking going off the rails. And when Sarah walks in and sees Rebecca, Rebecca tells her that Cuddles got out, and when she was out looking for him, she was jumped. A few days later, Sarah's professor asks her to stay after class, and he straight up proceeds to kiss her. By the way, you guys, this guy is fucking married. Sarah pushes him off and she runs off and tells Rebecca what happened. So Rebecca proceeds to go see the professor and she starts flirting with him. Then Rebecca starts to freak out. She's like, "Leave me alone, stop." And she reveals that she had actually recorded this and set up the whole thing to make it seem that he had actually attempted to essay her. And Rebecca gives that recording to the dean, so this guy gets fired. Honestly, it's not all that upsetting. Thanksgiving weekend rolls around and Rebecca invites Sarah to go home with her for Thanksgiving. Sarah agrees, but when they get there, it turns out Rebecca hadn't actually called her parents to let them know that they were coming. Now, the next day, when the girls go to a coffee shop, they run into this old friend of Rebecca's. And earlier, Sarah had actually seen some of Rebecca's drawings that looked just like her. The girl acts super weary around Rebecca, and before the girls leave, she tells Rebecca that they were never friends. When the girls are back at campus, Rebecca goes to the art studio for a little bit, and Sarah goes to look through Rebecca's stuff, and she finds a bottle of meds that apparently Rebecca isn't taking. And when Sarah looks up these pills online, she finds out that they are used to help treat things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And after finding that, Sarah's like, okay, you know what? I'm getting a little freaked out. I'm gonna go move in with Irene. Meanwhile, Rebecca hadn't actually gone to the studio like she told Sarah. She actually went out to a club. And this is where Rebecca meets Irene. The two girls kiss, and Irene actually invites Rebecca back to her place. The next day, Sarah's getting ready to move out when Rebecca comes up to her and she's like, hey, you know what? I want to get a tattoo. Will you go with me? And this is the tattoo that Rebecca gets. Rebecca even tells Sarah that you can think of me as a sister and you can call me Emily if you want. This really freaks Sarah out to the point where she just grabs a bunch of random stuff and moves in with Steven until Irene gets back in town. While she's packing, Sarah discovers that she can't actually find her necklace. But in spite of this, she's like, okay, you know what? Screw that. I'm out of here anyway, and I'll just find it later. A little bit later, Sarah's ex-boyfriend Jason comes to town, and he slips a piece of paper under Rebecca and Sarah's door that says, like, hey, I'm in town. I'm staying at this hotel in this room. Rebecca sees this note and decides that she wants to get rid of Jason. So she decides to dye her hair to look like Sarah. She puts on some of Sarah's perfume, and she also puts on Sarah's necklace because she had stolen that. Rebecca then goes to Jason's hotel room, and she climbs into bed with him while he's asleep, and then he wakes up, but he's still super groggy. And Rebecca, pretending to be Sarah, starts to mess around with him. Then she abruptly stops and kills Jason with the box cutter that she had used to hurt herself earlier. A little while later, we see that Sarah was supposed to meet Steven for a party at the frat house, and Sarah ends up leaving him a message that says, hey, you know what? I got a really unnerving voicemail from Irene, and now she's not answering her phone. And she tells Steven that I'm going over to Irene's apartment, meet me there. However, when Sarah gets to Irene's apartment, the door is wide open. And when Sarah goes to look in Irene's bedroom, she finds Irene tied to the bed and gagged. And Rebecca is standing there holding a fucking gun. She tells Sarah that I only want to be your friend, and that's when she got rid of Tracy, the cat, the professor, and Jason. Rebecca's about to shoot Irene, but at the last minute, Steven comes running in and grabs the gun. A fight ensues between the two of them, and Rebecca is actually able to knock Steven unconscious. A fight ensues between Rebecca and Sarah, but Sarah is able to lock Rebecca out of the room. Sarah tries to go free Irene, but Irene's like, no, go out the fire escape before she can get back in here. Because Rebecca has found the gun and she's shooting at the door trying to get in. Sarah goes to go down the fire escape, but turns out she can't actually reach the fire escape because the fire escape's located at the other window in the other room. Rebecca is finally able to break her way back into the room, and Sarah actually falls out the window. Sarah had grabbed onto the curtains as she fell, but she is literally dangling out the window now. Meanwhile, Steven has woken up and he comes charging into the room and he attacks Rebecca and knocks her out. Steven goes over to the window and pulls Sarah back into the apartment. However, Rebecca wakes up and she attacks Steven, knocking him out again. Sarah and Rebecca start fighting again, but Sarah manages to grab the gun. But when she points the gun at Rebecca and pulls the trigger, nothing happens. The gun is empty. The two girls start fighting again, and one of them knocks over one of their purses, and a bunch of stuff spills out, including that box cutter. Rebecca is able to get the upper hand in the fight, and she starts to choke Sarah. But at the last minute, Sarah manages to grab the box cutter and stab the blade into Rebecca's back. She tells Rebecca, I was never your friend, and Rebecca dies. Sarah takes her necklace back from Rebecca, who had been wearing it, and we also see that Steven and Irene are both okay. A little while later, we see Sarah move into a new dorm room, and she gets Steven's help in pulling the second bed out of the room because obviously she doesn't want a roommate anymore. Once again, I am Original Final Girl, and I got no fucking idea what I'm doing when I do this. But if you want to watch me make an ass of myself, then click that follow and like button. And don't forget to comment.